Pilot and aeronautics engineer Carroll Shelby started racing in 1952, beginning in an MGTC and quickly upgrading to Cadillac-powered Allards. By 1954, he was driving for the Aston Martin team, which he would continue to do through the end of the decade. He would also rack up numerous wins driving Ferraris, and in 1956, he opened a Maserati dealership, another car that he would race in. And soon, he was looking into dropping Corvette V8s into the Jaguar-powered Lister, leading to the short-lived Lister Chevrolet. He then tried to convince GM to build a more race-ready version of the Corvette. 3 prototypes were built using a lighter aluminum body, but GM shot down these so-called Scaglietti Corvettes. Health issues forced him to retire from racing in 1960, but he created a company under his own name to produce performance parts, and began working towards building an American-powered V8 sports car. As it turned out, the Bristol 6 was discontinued, leaving AC without an engine for their Ace sports car. So the cars were modified and adapted for a Ford-sourced 2.6-liter 170 cubic inch straight 6, which made them perfect for Shelby to drop in the new Ford Windsor V8 for 1962 as the Shelby Cobra. The first 75 cars used a 4.3-liter 260 with 260 horsepower, in a car that was 152 inches long on a 90-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,100 pounds, making a car that did the quarter mile in the high 13s with a top speed near 140 miles an hour. Then the engine grew to a 4.7-liter 289, increasing output to 275 horsepower, and the car would replace the AC Ace as the AC Cobra. The Mark II cars of 1963 modified the front end, adding rack and pinion steering from the MGB and a Volkswagen Beetle steering column. And in an effort to improve top speed, a more aerodynamic Shelby Daytona Coupe was created. It was longer at 163 inches and a similar 2,300 pounds, adding more wins to the Shelby brand for 64 and 65. And Shelby was already beginning to experiment with putting a bigger engine into the Cobra, dropping a big 390 into an experimental race-ready version that didn't really work out, but it did lead to the Mark III, with new coil spring suspension all the way around, a bigger radiator, and a longer, wider body. Powered by a monstrous 7-liter 427, initially rated at 410 to 425 horsepower, although tuned-down street versions could be as low as 355 horsepower, which could still be a low 12-second car, and with a 0 to 60 time of 4.2 seconds, meaning it was officially the world's quickest accelerating road car from 1965 until the Porsche 959 broke the record in 1986. While the SC, or street competition versions, were rated at a more potent 485 horsepower. But Shelby's focus was shifting towards the more commercially viable GT350 Mustang, starting with the sportiest K-Code 271 horsepower 289 4-speed Mustang GT. Shelby added a bigger 4-barrel on a high-rise manifold and tri-Y headers, increasing horsepower to 306. Also added were bigger rear drums from the Ford Galaxy and front disc brakes. The rear seat was removed to make room for a full-size spare tire, and special trim included available Krager Shelby wheels. It could do the quarter mile in under 14 seconds and nearly do 130 miles an hour, and the SCCA Focus GT350R increased output to 350 horsepower. In an effort to make them more buyer-friendly in 1966, it could be ordered with an automatic and/or a back seat, which allowed the creation of the GT350H, or Hertz, rent-a-racer version of the car, and a very small number of GT350s were made with a Paxton supercharger, bumping horsepower to 440. There would be big changes for Shelby for 1967, as production of the Cobra would come to an end. In total, there were 75 260 Cobras, 580 289 Cobras, and 348 big block Cobras made originally. And soon Ford would start using the Cobra name as a performance package on everything from the Mustang to the Fairlane and Torino, while the Shelby Mustangs would become even more distinct from other Mustangs. Distinctions that included unique front and rear styling with a fiberglass hood and Mercury Cougar taillights. and in addition to the GT350, there was a new GT500 that used a 7-liter, 428 cubic inch police interceptor with 355 horsepower. Much heavier, but still a 14-second car with a higher top speed. 1968 models got a revised hood and the taillights from a 65 Thunderbird, and there were powertrain changes. The 289 was replaced by a 350 horsepower 302, and a supercharger was available for 435 horsepower, while the GT500 was down to 335 horsepower, although the GT500 King of the Road increased torque, and some claims say horsepower as well. The 69 models would be even more distinct, with unique front styling, and the GT350 moved to a 290 horsepower 351 Windsor. But Shelby's association with Ford would be coming to an end, with leftover 1969 models becoming 1970 models, with fewer than 14,000 Shelby Mustangs having been built in total. But it wouldn't be the end of Shelby automobiles. In the early 80s, the Shelby name would be used in association with Dodge, starting with the 1983 Shelby Charger. It was essentially just a handling and appearance package, with upgraded transmission, steering, wheels and tires and suspension, an aero kit with ground effects, and special Shelby trim. Power came from a 107 horsepower version of the new Dodge 2.2-liter inline-4, a reasonably hot hatch for the time, taking just over 17 seconds to do the quarter mile and topping out at 115 miles an hour. Horsepower increased slightly in 1984, up to 110, and the modifications would be carried over to the Omni hatchback as the GLH, or Goes Like Hell. In 1985, added an available turbo, bumping horsepower to 146, putting the cars into the high 15s with speeds over 120 miles an hour. Then for 1986, Shelby would take the Omni to the next level with the GLH-S, adding an intercooler for 175 horsepower, easily a mid-15-second car reaching nearly 130 miles an hour, a treatment Shelby would soon apply to the Charger as well. Although 1987 would be the final year of the Shelby modified Omni and Charger, other Dodges would get the treatment, including the Lancer hatchback sedan, which got the same engine and similar handling upgrades, as well as Shelby badging, a stereo upgrade, and leather interior. It was a much heavier car, but was still a formidable performer for its class, not only being able to handle better than many European sports sedans, but also being able to pull a sub-16-second quarter mile. An actual Shelby product in its first year, Dodge would take over production for 1988 and 89. And more in tune with the previous cars was the Shelby CSX, also introduced in 1987. Using the body of the Dodge Shadow and Plymouth Sundance, it had its own grille and Shelby wheels, again with upgraded springs and brakes, and an 175 horsepower 2.2-liter. Costing over $13,000, it was nearly twice the price of a base Shadow. For its second year, it became the CSX-T for Thrifty Rental Car Agency, similar to the earlier Hertz cars, only in white with blue and gray trim. Power was down using the non-intercooled version of the engine. But the intercooler would return to the CSX for 1989, along with several other upgrades that included a bump in torque. And there would be a new Shelby Dakota that year, a performance version of Dodge's midsize pickup. It dropped the 5.2-liter 318 V8 from the full-size Ram into the sports package of the smaller pickup, along with a limited slip performance rear end, and horsepower was up 5 from the Ram to 175, making it a mid-15-second vehicle. But 1989 would be the end of the Shelby Dodges, although he would consult on the Cobra-inspired Dodge Viper, and the general concept would carry on as a simpler RT package on everything from the Spirit to a newer Dakota. It wasn't long, however, until Shelby was working on the development of a car of his own, as the Shelby Series 1. Mechanical and interior components came from the GM parts bin, although the body was unique. It was 169 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase, weighing 2,700 pounds, and powered by an Oldsmobile Aurora 4-liter V8. It was offered in 320 or 370 horsepower tunes, or in 450 horsepower supercharged form. making for a quarter mile under 13 seconds and a top speed of 170 miles an hour. Actual manufacturing was done by Venture Corp over 7 years, with all 249 cars being considered 1999 models. Then in 2006, Ford would bring back the Shelby GT350H Mustang, still in black and gold, starting with a new retro-styled Mustang GT and adding a list of features from the Ford Performance catalog, including racing exhaust, suspension, and rear axle, as well as a power pack option, making for 325 horsepower. It was a mid-13-second car, good for speeds near 160, and would return for 2007 as a convertible. The same year would see the introduction of the Shelby GT Mustang, which included a 219 horsepower version of the 4.6-liter 281 V8, as well as an appearance package. There was also the Shelby Terlingua, essentially a racing version of the base V6 Mustang. Equipped with a supercharger, it produced 375 horsepower. Ford's SVT group would also release a new GT500. It had a reinforced frame and shock towers, as well as a supercharged 5.4-liter V8 producing 500 horsepower. 2008 added 2 limited production appearance packages, the Grabber Orange Shelby GTC, or California, and the black Barrett-Jackson edition, with 215 and 100 produced respectively. And if one sent their GT500 to Shelby, he would upgrade it into a 605 horsepower Super Snake, a name taken from a one-off 650 horsepower 427 powered version of the original GT500. It would be the final year of the Shelby GT Mustang, but SVT introduced a GT500 King of the Road, featuring reinforced suspension, weight reduction using carbon fiber, and an additional 40 horsepower. Shelby introduced the Don Prudhomme Super Snake in 2009 in honor of the legendary drag racer known as the Snake. It produced 750 horsepower on pump gas, but was more of a track-oriented car. For 2010, the King of the Road was gone, but most of the features carried into the regular GT500. And for 2011, it gained a lighter version of the 5.4-liter with an additional 10 horsepower. Also, in celebration of its 45th anniversary, Shelby would introduce a new GT350. This, however, was a post-purchase upgrade performed by Shelby American, making it a tuner car as opposed to a production car. The package updated front styling to include a functional hood scoop, plus functional brake cooling ducts, upgraded suspension, and a 430 horsepower version of the new 5-liter V8, with an optional supercharged 525 horsepower version, making it a 12-second car. But if that wasn't enough, there was a 624 horsepower package available that voided the warranty. While the Super Snake was more of a handling sort of track car, with upgraded brakes and suspension, and having a supercharged engine producing 660 to 750 horsepower. 2012 expanded the GT350 package to include new colors and the convertible. There was also a GTS appearance package and an anniversary edition Super Snake to celebrate 50 years of Shelby Cars, as well as a limited edition GT500 Super Snake offered in 750 to 800 horsepower tunes. Also, the Shelby 1000 package offered in 920 horsepower street version and 1100 horsepower track version. Along with a facelift for 2013 that improved aerodynamics, the GT500 moved to a bigger 5.8-liter V8 with 662 horsepower, making it a mid-11-second car, and pushing the top speed over 200 miles an hour. The Shelby 1000 was revised, with only 850 horsepower in street form, but 1200 horsepower in track form. The Shelby GT returned in 2014 in base 430 horsepower form and supercharged GT-SC with 524 horsepower. Then there was an all-new Mustang for 2015 and a Shelby GT and Shelby GT EcoBoost, which continued to offer upgraded brakes and suspension and cold air induction along with its cosmetic changes. The Shelby GT350 got a 5.2-liter V8 with 526 horsepower, and there would be a GT350R with improved handling. There was a new Shelby Super Snake, effectively replacing the GT500, adding a supercharger to the Mustang GT. And the Terlingua returned, also supercharged, making 750 horsepower. 2016 would see the 50th anniversary of the Hertz cars with a Shelby GTH. In addition to the appearance package, it added a handling package and catback exhaust. There was also an anniversary edition of the Super Snake for 2017, as well as a Shelby GTE, or Enhanced GT, adding power to both the V8 GT and the EcoBoost. The GT350 was updated for 2019 with improved suspension, tires, and aerodynamics, and got further upgrades for 2020, as well as a GT350 Signature Edition, which was essentially a 55th anniversary edition. A new GT500 was introduced, using a supercharged alloy 5.2-liter Predator V8, producing 760 horsepower. And there was a GT500 Code Red that used a twin-turbo version of the engine, as well as there being a few other variants. Shelby has become an integral part of Mustang models, with new versions coming soon, and they are likely to continue for some time. And we didn't even look at the Cobra-badged Mustang models. Although not Shelby's, they are still associated by use of the Cobra name. Over the years, Shelby has made cars, modified cars, and had their name applied to cars by other manufacturers. There have been numerous licensed Shelby replicas and so-called continuation cars, or later versions of the cars produced by Shelby, as well as many other Cobra and Daytona kits, making the Shelby Cobra one of the most replicated cars of all time. Meaning that in spite of limited production numbers, Shelby has made a mark on the industry like few others. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.